They didn't just envy you. They didn't just speak against you. They didn't just pray for your downfall in silence. They crossed a line so dark that it shook the unseen realm. They took your name, your image, your very identity, and handed it to forces they never fully understood, believing that darkness could succeed where lies and manipulation had failed. But listen carefully. Allah is all-knowing. Nothing escapes His knowledge. What shocked the world was not Allah's awareness, but the depth of human desperation when they realize they cannot stop what Allah has chosen. If you are watching this right now, understand this. No curse was stronger than your dua. No plot was greater than Allah's protection, and no enemy was powerful enough to touch a servant whose destiny was sealed by the Most High. This message found you because you were targeted and you were preserved. When they realized that no matter how much they lied about you, no matter how many traps they set, no matter how hard they tried to damage your reputation, isolate you, exhaust you, or break you through worldly means, you were still standing by the permission of Allah. Something inside them snapped, because there is a special kind of frustration that overtakes people when they see someone survive what was meant to destroy them. And at that moment, their hatred stopped being logical and became spiritual, because they understood that you were not surviving by strength alone, not by intelligence alone, not by connections or defenses, but by an unseen protection they could not penetrate with hands or words. And this is where desperate people cross forbidden lines, turning to darkness when light cannot be defeated directly, forgetting that the Quran already warned that Shaytan has no authority over the sincere servants of Allah. Yet still they tried, because envy blinds wisdom and arrogance convinces the heart that it can challenge the decree of the Most High. So when physical harm failed, they tried spiritual harm, not realizing that by doing so, they exposed the true reason you were targeted in the first place, which was never because you were weak, but because you were dangerous to falsehood, because your presence disrupted their comfort, reflected their hypocrisy, and reminded them of truths they were running from. And Allah allowed this stage not to empower the attack, but to reveal the depth of their corruption and the height of your protection. Because every time darkness is sent toward a believer unjustly, angels are sent with it, recording intentions, reversing harm, and fortifying the one who was wronged. So what they believed would finally end you actually marked the moment your status was sealed, your spiritual rank elevated, and your enemies unknowingly signed their own exposure, while you, without even knowing the details of what was attempted, were being guarded, preserved, and strengthened in ways that no human eye could see, proving once again that when Allah chooses someone, even the most desperate attacks only serve to confirm that choice rather than cancel it. Allah did not allow the plot against you to move forward because He was unaware, nor because He needed to see what would happen, for He is Al-Alam, the all-knowing, but because exposure is a form of justice that cuts deeper than punishment, and there are moments when Allah allows people to reveal themselves fully so that no one can ever question the truth again, because if He had stopped them early, they would have continued wearing the mask of innocence, playing the victim, and hiding behind false righteousness. But by allowing their plan to unfold just far enough, Allah stripped them of excuses and left behind evidence that even time cannot erase. And this is why the Quran repeatedly reminds us that Allah gives people rope not to save them, but to test what they will do with it. And they chose betrayal, malice, and spiritual treachery, believing secrecy would protect them, not realizing that every intention is weighed before every action, and every whisper is louder in the unseen than a scream in the visible world, while you, the one being targeted, were kept unaware of many details, not because you were unworthy of the truth, but because Allah was shielding your heart from fear while He handled the case Himself, and as they sank deeper into their plot. Allah was quietly rearranging reality so that what they buried would rise, what they hid would surface, and what they denied would confront them until the very actions they used to justify their hatred became the proof of their corruption. And by the time the truth emerged, no explanation could save them, because Allah does not expose to humiliate only. He exposes to establish clarity, to protect the innocent, and to remind the world that no evil remains hidden forever when it is directed at one of his protected servants, making their plot not a victory, but a written testimony against them that will follow them in this life and the next. They would never have reached for darkness if your light had not unsettled them, because darkness is not summoned against someone insignificant. It is only called upon when truth becomes unbearable and exposure feels imminent. And this is the part many chosen ones struggle to understand, that the intensity of the attack is often a direct reflection of the intensity of the light you carry. For your presence alone began to reveal what they spent years hiding. Your words carried weight even when you spoke softly. Your silence carried authority even when you withdrew. And this is why they felt threatened without you ever declaring war, because light does not accuse, it illuminates. And illumination is terrifying to those who survive on shadows. So instead of correcting themselves, repenting, or turning back to Allah, they chose the easier path of resisting truth through forbidden means, believing that if they could corrupt the source of the light, the exposure would stop, not realizing that light given by Allah is not a flame that can be blown out, but a guidance placed in the heart that grows stronger under pressure. And Allah allowed them to misuse darkness so the contrast would become undeniable, so others could see clearly who stood upon guidance and who stood upon fear. And while they thought they were weakening you, Allah was refining you, sharpening your discernment, strengthening your reliance on Him alone, and increasing the reach of your light. Because every unjust attempt against a believer polishes the soul rather than stains it. And in the end, the very darkness they relied upon became the proof that your light was real, divinely sourced, and far beyond their ability to extinguish. What they intended to release against you as destruction never arrived in the form they imagined, because they underestimated a reality that governs both the seen and unseen. When a believer is targeted unjustly, Allah does not simply block harm, He transforms it. And this is why the curse they believed would weaken you became a system of divine protection wrapped around your life, your mind, your faith, and your destiny, because every malicious intention they directed toward you was intercepted by a decree already written. A decree that said this servant will not fall by envy, will not break by betrayal, and will not be consumed by darkness. And although they acted with certainty that something irreversible had been set in motion, Allah allowed only what would benefit you to pass through, filtering harm into wisdom, pressure into strength, and fear into reliance upon Him alone, which is why you may have felt moments of heaviness without collapse, confusion without loss, isolation without abandonment, because what reached you was not the curse itself, but the mercy hidden inside an attack that had already been neutralized, repurposed, and redirected. And while they watched closely expecting your downfall, Allah was quietly assigning angels to guard your sleep, your thoughts, your steps, and even the doors you never opened. Because divine protection does not always announce itself with miracles people can see. Sometimes it manifests as delayed plans that save you from traps, broken connections that save you from long-term harm, or sudden clarity that pulls you away from environments meant to drain you. And this is why, after everything they tried, you are still standing with your faith intact, your heart softer toward Allah, and your discernment sharper than before. Because Allah used what they meant for evil to separate you from illusions, expose hidden enemies, and align you more precisely with your purpose, proving that no curse can overpower dua, no darkness can override light sourced from the Most High, and no human or jinn can cross a boundary Allah Himself has drawn. So what they thought would mark your end became a fortress around your future. What they hoped would shatter you became the reason you are spiritually stronger, wiser, and more guarded. And what they offered to darkness returned as a witness that Allah's protection over a chosen one is not fragile, temporary, or accidental, but deliberate, active, and unbreakable, operating in ways the human mind cannot fully grasp, yet the soul unmistakably recognizes. While they were meeting in whispers, exchanging messages behind closed doors, watching you from a distance with jealousy in their hearts and malice in their intentions, believing that secrecy would give their plans power, Allah was simultaneously working on a level they could neither access nor interrupt, Because divine elevation never begins in public spaces. It begins in isolation, in silence, in moments where the servant feels unseen, misunderstood, and even forgotten. And this is where they made their greatest mistake, assuming that your quiet season was a sign of weakness, decline, or defeat, when in reality it was the evidence that Allah had removed you from the noise so He could rebuild you without interference. Because when Allah intends to elevate a servant, He first detaches them from people, validation, explanations, and the need to prove anything. And during the same period, they were obsessively plotting how to slow you down. Allah was strengthening your sabr, increasing your tawakkul, and teaching you how to stand firmly without external support. And every delay they celebrated was actually training you for endurance. Every misunderstanding they spread was sharpening your discernment. And every attempt to isolate you was pushing you closer to Allah, which is the highest form of elevation a believer can receive. Because status without faith collapses, but faith refined under pressure becomes unshakable. And while they believed they were erasing your influence, Allah was expanding it quietly, planting your impact in places they could not see, softening hearts you had not yet met, and preparing paths that would open only when you were ready to walk them with humility and strength. And this is why your growth during that time felt painful rather than glamorous, because Allah was elevating you internally before ever allowing external elevation, teaching you restraint instead of reaction, wisdom instead of revenge, and reliance upon Him instead of people. And as they continued plotting, Allah was removing impurities from your intentions, making sure that when your rise eventually becomes visible, it would not corrupt you, inflate your ego, or distance you from Him, because elevation that comes too early often destroys the servant it was meant to honor. And Allah does not elevate to test your downfall. He elevates to establish you firmly. And this is why the pressure intensified right before your breakthrough, because elevation attracts resistance, and refinement always precedes expansion. And while they were measuring progress by rumors, outcomes, and appearances, Allah was measuring by patience, sincerity, and consistency in faith. And you passed tests you didn't even realize you were sitting for. Tests of silence when provoked, restraint when falsely accused, mercy when betrayed, and trust when answers were delayed. And these unseen victories were recorded long before any visible change appeared. So by the time their plot reached what they believed was its climax, you were no longer operating on the same level they were targeting, because Allah had already elevated your mindset, your emotional resilience, your spiritual awareness, and your dependence on Him alone, making their efforts outdated, misdirected, and powerless. And when Allah elevates a servant, He does not announce it immediately. He lets the results speak through peace that cannot be shaken, clarity that cannot be confused, stability that cannot be sabotaged, and faith that does not collapse under pressure. So while they were investing energy into pulling you down in secret, Allah was investing mercy, wisdom, and strength into lifting you up in secret. And when the contrast finally becomes visible, it will be clear to everyone that one side was plotting from fear and insecurity, while the other was being elevated by the Lord of the worlds, step by step, layer by layer, into a position that no hidden scheme, no whispered plan, and no enemy working in the shadows could ever reach. The most important reality for every chosen one to understand is that no matter how relentless the attacks, how cunning the schemes, or how dark the intentions directed against you, the devil, Shaytan, has no real authority over a servant whom Allah has placed under His protection. And this is a truth that many do not fully comprehend, because they see the whispers, the pressure, the anxiety, and believe for a moment that there is power in what is being sent. But in reality, the devil's reach is limited to what humans allow through weakness, distraction, and misguidance. And when a servant is sincere, steadfast, and reliant upon Allah, every whisper becomes a warning, every attempt at harm becomes a lesson, and every temptation that passes through the mind without surrender becomes a recorded victory. And this is why those who plotted against you, who handed your image to darkness, who invoked every strategy of envy, fear, and manipulation, were ultimately powerless, because while they were invoking the devil, The Most High was invoking protection, surrounding you with angels, fortifying your heart, preserving your soul, and sealing every avenue that was meant to reach you with harm. And what the enemy believed was an opportunity for destruction became instead a mechanism for your elevation. Because Allah does not merely block attacks, He converts them into spiritual shields, life lessons, and unseen victories. And while the devil operates in fear, distraction, lies, and deception, a protected servant moves through the world under divine oversight, where every step is counted, every dua answered, and every attempt at harm neutralized in a way that the human eye cannot see, yet the soul feels unmistakably. And this is why patience and silence are essential tools for the chosen ones. Because the more the enemy attempts to provoke, distract, or destroy, the more Allah refines the servant, increases reliance upon him, and elevates spiritual rank without the enemy ever noticing. And the devil's influence is only real when there is surrender, compromise, or disbelief, none of which exists in a heart that has been deliberately chosen, prepared, and protected. And this is why you may have felt pressure, fear, or anxiety at times during these attacks, yet no permanent harm befell you, no faith was broken, and no destiny was altered. Because protection from Allah is active, dynamic, and deliberate, moving invisibly through the world to intercept every harmful plan, every hidden conspiracy, every whisper of envy or malice, transforming them into lessons, refining your character, and proving to both the seen and unseen realms that the servant of Allah cannot be overpowered by what was meant to destroy. And while the devil may attempt to infiltrate through doubt, whispering, or fear, he cannot penetrate the heart of a servant whose reliance, trust, and connection to Allah is complete. Because Allah Himself says in the Quran that He is the protector of the believers, the one who surrounds them from all sides, and the one who prevents harm from reaching them unless He wills it for wisdom, elevation, or test. And this is why every obstacle, every dark attempt, and every unseen attack against you not only failed but became a sign of your status, a proof of divine protection, and an indicator to all who understand that the chosen one is never alone, never unguarded, and never at the mercy of forces that cannot touch what Allah Himself safeguards. And as they continued to act in secret, believing their plans were effective, Allah was actively fortifying every aspect of your being, every thought, every emotion, every intention, and every action, ensuring that not one scheme would succeed and not one malicious effort would alter the path written for you. Because the moment a servant is under divine protection, Shaytan loses influence over decisions, outcomes, spiritual energy, and even the perception of fear. And what the enemy intended for destruction became, instead, a confirmation of divine favor, a record of faith, and a shield of mercy, demonstrating that no matter how dark the plot, how extensive the deception, or how persistent the attack, the chosen one remains untouchable, resilient, and guided. Because Allah's protection is not passive, it is precise, active, unbreakable, and unfailing, extending beyond this life, reaching into every unseen dimension, every hidden interaction, and every attempt at manipulation, proving without question that the devil has no authority, no control, and no power over one whom Allah Himself has decided to safeguard, elevate, and honor. And this truth alone should embolden every chosen one, reminding you that every whisper of malice, every attempt at harm, and every dark plan against you was neutralized before it ever touched your soul. And while the enemy continues to act in secrecy, plotting in vain, Allah continues to protect openly and silently, demonstrating that the chosen ones do not need to fear forces that have no real authority, because the Lord of the worlds Himself is their shield, their guide, and their ultimate protector, turning every attack into an opportunity for growth, every conspiracy into a lesson of divine justice, and every encounter with darkness into proof of unshakable faith, clarity of destiny, and the reality that no evil can ever overpower the one whom Allah has decreed to remain steadfast, elevated, and victorious, now and forever. When they launched what they believed would be the ultimate blow, when they concentrated every ounce of malice, envy, and cunning into a final act meant to destroy you, they were unaware that Allah had already turned that very moment into the doorway of your elevation. Because divine wisdom is hidden in every step of a chosen one's journey, and what humans perceive as an ending is often the beginning of a path only Allah can reveal. And as they plotted in secret, hoping to seal your defeat, Allah was simultaneously arranging events, people, circumstances, and unseen forces in a manner that they could neither detect nor influence, positioning you at the threshold of your destiny, a threshold they assumed they had barred, but which Allah had already unlocked with keys of mercy, timing, and divine decree. And this is why the Quran repeatedly reminds us that those who oppose the servants of Allah often prepare traps only to find themselves entrapped in their own schemes. Because every action against a believer is measured, every intention weighed, and every plan allowed only to the extent that it will serve Allah's purpose, which is to elevate, test, and purify His chosen. And as they invested effort into the unseen, hoping to weaken you, they were unknowingly clearing obstacles from your path, removing distractions, and setting the stage for breakthroughs, clarity, and expansion that they could not anticipate. And in this process, every fear they instilled, every threat they imagined, and every act of manipulation they attempted became a marker of your resilience, a test of your reliance, and a catalyst for your growth. Because Allah does not elevate the chosen ones through ease alone, He elevates them through trials, through opposition, and through the contrast between human weakness and divine strength. And this is why you may have felt moments of confusion, anxiety, or pressure at the time, because the transition from one stage of destiny to another often comes with a spiritual weight that the soul must bear before receiving the light of clarity. And while they celebrated in secret, thinking the door to your future was closed, Allah was opening windows of opportunity, aligning connections, preparing resources, and activating unseen support systems that would launch you into a level of purpose, influence, and fulfillment they could never imagine. And every secret attack was intercepted, redirected, or transformed into momentum for your advancement. Because divine protection is not reactive, but proactive, working long before the first blow lands, and no scheme, no malice, and no act of deception can override the plan Allah has written, which is why at the exact moment they believed you were at your lowest, Allah was elevating you to a plane where their opposition became irrelevant, their hatred became a sign of your value, and their final act became the very instrument that propelled you forward. And this is the paradox of the chosen ones. Every attempt to destroy them is a step toward their fulfillment. Every hidden attack is a bridge to a breakthrough. And every act of human malice is a mirror reflecting the inevitability of divine decree. And while they thought they were writing the last chapter of your story, Allah was writing the introduction to your destiny, filled with clarity, influence, spiritual authority, and peace that no enemy can touch. And this is why you emerge not broken, but stronger, not defeated, but wiser, not lost, but aligned, because the chosen one's path is never subject to human manipulation, and the final acts of those who oppose you serve only to confirm your elevation, reveal the depth of your protection, and announce that the doors to your destiny have not only been opened, but secured by the Most High. So every step you take forward carries the weight of divine favor, every challenge becomes a sign of preparation, and every encounter with opposition transforms into evidence that what Allah has written for you cannot be blocked, delayed, or undone. And this is why, when the dust settles, the world will see that the one they tried to destroy was not only preserved, but elevated, not only protected, but positioned, and not only victorious, but destined, proving in the most undeniable way that the chosen one's journey is always under Allah's control. Every step guided, every trial measured, and every opening toward destiny deliberate, purposeful, and unstoppable. Chosen one, every attack, every scheme, every whisper of envy directed against you was never stronger than the protection Allah placed around you. They tried to write your ending, but Allah was writing your destiny. They handed your name, your image, and your essence to darkness. But Allah turned their plans into evidence of your light, lessons in your elevation, and proof of His unshakable protection. What they believed would harm you only strengthened your faith, sharpened your heart, and prepared you for a purpose far greater than you could imagine. Remember this clearly: the trials you endured, the whispers you ignored, the plots you survived, they were not signs of weakness, but confirmation that you are chosen, that you are protected, and that your journey is guided by the Most High. So walk forward with confidence, with patience, and with unwavering trust in Allah, because every step you take, every challenge you overcome, and every obstacle that once seemed insurmountable is now a marker of your destiny, your strength, and your divine purpose. The enemies who plotted against you may never understand the magnitude of what they tried to do, but the one who truly matters, Allah, Al-Muhaymin, Al-Mu'izz, knows everything, and He has already placed victory, clarity, and elevation in your path. Stand tall, chosen one, for the world may try to test you, the unseen may try to scare you, and the darkness may attempt to surround you, but nothing and no one can ever override what Allah has written for you. Your protection is certain, your purpose is clear, and your destiny is unstoppable. And those who witness your rise will see that nothing prepared by humans or jinn could ever match the power of what Allah has decreed.